Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gabe Cohen, and I'm GuideStar's Senior Director of Marketing and Communications. Welcome to our fourth and final impact call for 2016. Before we start, I just want to make sure that everyone knows you can join us on Twitter for the conversation. Our hashtag today is hashtag GS Impact Call, and our handle is @GuideStarUSA. We want our impact calls to be interactive. As always, we will reserve some time at the end of today's 30-minute webinar for questions and answers. But please feel free to submit questions throughout the webinar today. You can do that by either using the dashboard right there in GoToWebinar, look for the questions pane, or on Twitter, use the hashtag GSImpactCall. Joining me for today's impact call are our President and CEO, Jacob Harold, and our Vice President of Strategy and Finance, Ms. Kusairi. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jacob.
Terrific. Thanks, Gabe, and welcome everyone to this impact call. We have half an hour set aside to give you an update on what's happening with GuideStar, what we've been learning, what our results have been of late, and then to have a conversation. And the basic structure is here on your screen. And we will talk through both programmatic and financial results with a couple of qualitative introductions as well. To start out, though, we're going to begin with a quick poll, and today is indeed a day of polls. We're just asking, have you voted yet? So if everyone can just click and let us know, we can get a sense of the folks on the call and whether or not people have engaged in their civic duty. And here we go. So it looks like, all right, the majority of you have already voted. And there's about 1 out of 5 of you that haven't yet, but hopefully we'll get a chance to later today. And then a couple folks haven't, but they've got a good excuse. So we thank you all for engaging in our democracy. So speaking of which, one of the recent projects that we worked on here at GuideStar was in response to an immense amount of interest that we were getting about the Trump Foundation and the Clinton Foundation. A lot of folks asking us, tell us about these organizations. Are they transparent? Are they effective? And so we decided to respond to that request. And it ended up being the single blog post that had the most views in the history of GuideStar, about 30,000. And we managed to get media from BBC to Wired to the LA Times. And it was a very gratifying opportunity for us to use our data in a way to help address some confusion that has been out in society about the nature of nonprofits and foundations. I will say, though, that we didn't get to everyone, and it's been remarkable just how much of the conversation about this presidential election has been about these two nonprofit organizations. And unfortunately, a lot of it has been pretty negative. And I think we in the nonprofit community are going to have to spend some time educating the public about what nonprofits are really all about. And not let the conversation about these two particular organizations cast a pall over the broader field. I'm confident we're going to be able to do that, but for us to do that well, we're going to have to be transparent and intentional as a field, and we'll talk about that a bit more. And in fact, this very call is an attempt on GuideStar's part for us to be transparent, for us to, we call it the anti-hypocrisy mechanism here, which is if we're going to ask nonprofits to share information about themselves, we should do the same. And we want to do so in a way that's proactive, where we are spending time thinking about how to tell our story and share our results with you, our stakeholders, whether you are yourself at a nonprofit or you're a donor, a journalist, a researcher, a foundation staffer, in professional services, whatever reason you care about GuideStar, we care about you, and we care about making sure that you understand what we're up to. And so we do these calls quarterly. Thousands of people have joined them over the last few years, and they've been a great way for us to share what we're up to at GuideStar, and then also to hear back from you. And during the Q&A section, we welcome any feedback that you may have for us on things that we should prioritize as we move along as an organization. For those of you who aren't as familiar with GuideStar's strategy, here's a very quick summary of it, which is that we are in the middle of a flow of information. Now, I don't expect you to be able to read every word on this very detailed chart, but it's basically just an attempt to visualize how information flows from the left-hand side to the right-hand side, from those who have information about nonprofits to those who need that information. And for us, we have two primary sources of data: the IRS Form 990 that nonprofits file with the U.S. government, and then nonprofits themselves who supplement the data provided in the 990 with information shared directly with GuideStar. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And then we distribute that through our website, which has about 8 million visitors a year, and then through our many channel partners that share GuideStar's data on their own platforms, whether that's Amazon.com or the donor-advised funds of Fidelity, Vanguard, and Schwab, new apps coming out of Google and Intuit, 218 total other platforms where data about your organization, if you're with a nonprofit, that's organized by GuideStar, is showing up on another platform. Now, I mentioned that we have been collecting data directly from nonprofits because no one wants to tell their entire story just through a tax form. A nonprofit shouldn't do that with their 990, and a citizen shouldn't do that with their 1040. So we allow nonprofits to share additional information, and about 128,000 have done so far, and 35,000 of those have gotten one of our transparency seals. If you haven't done that yet, we'd ask you to do that to make sure that we're able to present as full and accurate a story about your organization as we possibly can. And we regularly update the questions that we ask to make sure that they are as streamlined as possible, as comprehensive as possible, and that they're evolving according to the changing needs of the nonprofit community. So we will, in the next quarter, be releasing our 2017 GuideStar Profile Standard. That's just the list of questions that we ask. We've gone through a long process with our advisors and our constituents to try and make sure that this process is as easy and meaningful as possible for the nonprofit sharing the information, and then for the donors, journalists, and others who are looking at that information. So keep an eye out for the updated GuideStar Profile Standard coming soon. Another thing we've been spending a lot of time on lately is GuideStar for grant applications. And this is a part of our, what we call our channel strategy, where one important channel of information about nonprofits is the software that foundations use to manage their grant processes. And those of you that are at nonprofits that raise money from foundations know just how much paperwork that can be, and how much duplication there is, redundancy. And GuideStar for grant applications is an attempt to help to solve that problem and to streamline the grant-making process. And we just launched a new video, which I'm going to share, about GuideStar for grants. It's about a minute long. I'll just flag that because it's going through our internet connection and your internet connection. There might be a slight lag, but we will be sending you the link to get to the YouTube version. But you will be able to catch the gist of it. And again, it's just about 1 minute long, so let's watch that now, and then we'll move on from there.
Foundations implement this functionality. For nonprofits, time isn't just money. It's resources and energy desperately needed to solve society's biggest challenges. A single nonprofit spends hundreds of hours each year filling out grant applications. Multiply that by all nonprofits, and doing good starts looking more like doing paperwork. But foundations have the power to change that. When applying for a grant, GuideStar for grant applications eliminates the need for nonprofits to enter the same information over and over again. Foundations implement this functionality in their grant management software, allowing nonprofits to populate applications with common information from their up-to-date GuideStar nonprofit profiles. That saves nonprofits precious time and provides foundations with consistent standardized data, while still providing the chance to ask unique questions for each grant. Lots of foundations are already using GuideStar for grant applications, but if you're not, get the ball rolling and talk to your grant management vendor. Standardizing the way that we share data strengthens the sector, making it easier for nonprofits to focus on their missions and for foundations to make better decisions. So let's commit to streamlining the grant application process and turn the hours spent filling out applications into hours doing good.
Great. Well, I hope you were able to hear that, and that captures the basic idea behind GuideStar for Grants, that let's remove waste and duplication from the system where it's not helping, allow nonprofits to focus on their missions, allow foundations to get the data that we need, and to capture the power of some pretty basic technologies to just streamline and organize how information flows in the nonprofit sector. Now, we recognize, though, that it's not just about technology, and it's about the people filling out this data and using it. So we've started to go out into the nonprofit community and talk directly to folks, share how we're thinking about this, and work with them to ensure that the nonprofits are comfortable in filling out these profiles and sharing the information they need, and that foundations are able to use that information effectively. We did a 2-day training in Philadelphia in September, and we'll be doing more of these, perhaps in a community near you, to just try and provide as much support as we possibly can to the nonprofit community to make sure that you can focus on your work and not focus on paperwork. Another tool that we'll have coming out soon is essentially it embeds the new technology that we've developed on GuideStar.org into another organization's website, which could be a local nonprofit association or a newspaper or a university, looking at a subset of nonprofits. So, and we think this way we can spread out and magnify the number of places where people can access good information about nonprofits, but they'll be accessing the same information. So there won't be that waste and duplication that, that I just talked about. So keep an eye out for that early next year. With that, I will hand it over to my colleague, Ms., to talk through our programmatic and financial results for the last quarter.
Great. Thank you so much, Jacob. I'm so excited to be speaking with you all today. Since most of you are new to the call, I'm just going to go over the basic framework that we share our programmatic results. So if you recall back to the data and information flow that Jacob walked through, our seals of transparency are how we categorize information that nonprofits provide supplemental to what's already in the 990. And as you can see in the last few bars on this slide, the growth has been very steady over the course of this year. We're most excited about the platinum growth, and that's when nonprofits are sharing quantitative programmatic results with us. And that, you know, again, in turn, we share on our website and on others' website as well. So that number is now, you know, nearly 1,200, which is nearly doubled from when we launched it earlier this year. The overall trend over the last couple of quarters has also been very positive. We had a very successful nonprofit summer games. We were very excited about that, and thank you for those of you who participated. So we're excited about the continued growth and look forward to being able to share even higher numbers with you in future quarters. Moving on to the information from GuideStar that gets distributed to other sites. On GuideStar.org itself, the top chart there reflects users that come to our site as well as the number of registered users. You'll see both of those have been trending up over the course of the year. We've had about 5% and 13% growth over those two numbers, and you know, we're excited. About 3 million total registered users are on GuideStar right now, and we're very excited for, again, those numbers to also continue to grow over the course of the next few quarters. The two charts at the bottom reflect, you know, two of the initiatives that Jacob just walked us through. So the one on the left is when information gets shared from GuideStar to other websites. That's the information on other websites, other mobile apps, and then on the right is the GuideStar for Grants, or G4G program, the video that you just saw. So those numbers are also increasing right now. We have 35 foundations who are participating, and you know, with the broader launch that Jacob mentioned too, we are excited about more foundations participating. Transitioning to looking at some longer-term metrics. For those of you who have been on past calls, I've alluded to that we have been working on this. But before I get to that, as an infrastructure organization to the nonprofit sector overall, we always think about ourselves as being a player in a broader field, and so we think it's important for us to track as well as share information that reflects what's going on in the broader nonprofit community. And with that, we share and track the amount of charitable giving, as well as another metric that we focus on, which is the Money for Good study that looks at individual donors who compare organizations when making philanthropic decisions. And both those metrics have continued to trend in a very positive direction. And while we can't take full credit for that, we like to think that we hopefully move the needle a little bit on those results. Very much related to that, and I will move on to the next slide, which over the course of the last quarter, several folks within GuideStar, as well as, we've reviewed this with our board, as well as our advisory council. In looking at our own programmatic metrics, we realized that we need to step back. We needed to look at our broader theory of change. And we mapped this too. We've had some edits around this, and we map this back to the data and information flow. So we look at, if you read from left to right, I know there's a lot of information on here, and I'm not planning to go through it all with you today, but if you look from left to right, we look at the inputs into GuideStar, the data through the 990s or through other sources, as well as the information from nonprofits, the outputs, and then long-term outcomes that we're hoping to strive for, as well as the impact, increasing the quantity and quality of giving and increasing the efficiency and effectiveness of nonprofits. The information on the left is what we are trying to demonstrate in our metrics. I provided a couple on the prior slides. What you'll see next quarter is a new framework that we will use to demonstrate how we are providing what it is that we're setting out to provide. And then on the information on the right, the evidence, because we're an infrastructure organization, because the work that we do, similar to a lot of you, takes time. And we need to make sure that we are properly linking and understanding our efforts on a day-to-day basis that lead to the broader change in the world that we want to see. And so that information on evidence and evaluating our work is a longer-term effort, and we hope to have that information to you by the end of next year, where we can get quantitative as well as qualitative measures of the outcomes that we are striving for. Shifting a bit now over to financial results. The third quarter was a little bit of a challenge for us. We, as a result of better communication and better systems, we had some visibility, greater visibility into our revenue. So revenue trended down a little bit in the third quarter versus prior quarters, but because we had that visibility early on, we were also able to manage our expenses. So as a result, the change in unrestricted net assets was positive. A lot of that was due to release of grants that we received in 2015, that we released in 2016, which I will talk a little bit more about in the lessons learned. But then if you look at our change in total net assets, because our expenses, while they were managed, were not sufficiently covered by our revenue last quarter, and so that's why we have a negative position there. Shifting to our statement of financial position from the statement of activities information that I just provided, the results again here from the third quarter shown in the yellow bars. Our cash position has been at a steady nearly about $2 million now, and our net assets are positive $300,000. I will really dive into the next section here, which is our lessons learned. We just completed our audit this quarter, and for those of you who have been on prior calls, you might see that or notice that some of the prior quarters, those numbers have changed. And the first lesson that I'll go through with you right now is just, keep an open dialogue with your auditors. They shouldn't be people that you speak to once a year when they come on site, but we really look to them for guidance. We were very fortunate to have received several multi-year grants last year. We even got a big payment early. And while we've always been focused on getting unrestricted grant funding or funding for general operations, which allows us the maximum amount of flexibility, an area that we had paid slightly less attention to but have really bounded from now is looking at those time restrictions. And what we've struggled with is to make sure that we are accurately reflecting the intentions of our grantors. And so we're making sure that we've codified that information in our fiscal policies, and I want to make sure that if it's with revenue recognition for grants, as I'm sure a lot of you have to review each time you do get a grant or as you're reviewing grant agreements, that we want to make sure that we're accurately reflecting the intent of the funder as well as what's reflected in the actual agreement as well. So after reviewing that first lesson learned, I'm going to turn it over back to Jacob for the second one.
Awesome. Thanks, Ms. And yeah, we've just been very lucky as we've dealt with some pretty complex accounting questions to just have a great relationship with our auditors. It really helped us when we've come to something that we didn't fully understand. And then Ms. and her team have just done a terrific job as we navigate our own financial evolution. And I feel great about where we are right now. A second lesson learned for us in the last quarter, it gets back to the blog post that I mentioned for the Clinton Foundation and the Trump Foundation, that we got a lot of requests for us to weigh in. And we were nervous about that because we always want to make sure that we are honoring the need that the field has for a neutral platform with objective data. And I think an important lesson learned is that it is possible for us to comment on issues as long as we do so in a way that is fact-based, that is balanced, and that rises from our expertise in understanding the nonprofit sector. And so that felt good to us, to see the positive reaction we got there, and we're thinking about other ways that we can use our voice that can be helpful in ways that are helpful to the broader nonprofit community. So to close, before we shift over to questions, why does all this matter? And I'll just offer a thought, which is, this chart that I showed before, which again, we don't expect you to be able to read, has all these different lines showing the flow of information from one place to another. And if you look at it, it's kind of like a cloth. What we're doing is we're weaving together these threads of information. And I think of the nonprofit sector's role in our democracy in a similar way. The nonprofits are those threads that connect people together, and that collectively the nonprofit community is a cloth that's an important part of the American story. So as we face a time of political division, I hope that the nonprofit community can do what we do well and bring people together and share our common hopes about what it's going to take to make a better world. That's extra burden on our shoulders. Not only are we tackling poverty or environmental destruction, but we have an obligation, I think, to help to strengthen our democracy. And I've got a lot of faith that the nonprofit community can do just that. So with that final thought, let's shift to questions. I know that Gabe has been collecting some, so I'll leave it to him to read them out.
Yeah, thanks, Jacob, and thanks for everybody for submitting questions. We do have about 5 minutes here before we'll wrap up, and if anyone has additional questions, again, just use that questions pane on the right-hand side in the GoToWebinar dashboard. To start off with, Karen has a question that we get asked pretty regularly, and Jacob, I'm hoping you can answer this. So Karen asks, we are a program based at a university. Our nonprofit status is derived from the university's foundation. How can we better provide information on our specific program?
Yeah, so this is a great question. This has been something that's been a real challenge for us because our database has historically been based on the tax ID numbers that nonprofits have with the IRS. That's meant that for some big, complex nonprofits, including some universities or university foundations, that an individual program or institute can kind of get lost. And so right now, the answer is that an individual institute will have to find the person in the university who oversees the profile and try and ask to have their institute or their program or their department highlighted. But we are changing that. We are shifting the structure of our database so that we're able to better reflect the sub-entities, the parts of larger nonprofits. This doesn't just play out at universities, it also plays out for many fiscally sponsored nonprofits as well, or other kinds of national networks of organizations. So know that we are working on this problem. Our engineers have a plan to begin to address significant parts of that in 2017. But we very much recognize that historically what the nonprofit sector has done and relied just on these tax ID numbers really obscures some of the really good work that's happening out there.
Great. The next question here is from Shirley. I review grants for philanthropic activities, and I am trying to find a simple way to determine if an organization is a public charity. Will that be discussed? So, Jacob, do you want to talk a little bit about GuideStar Charity Check?
Sure. So we do have a tool that does exactly that, that brings together a whole set of different data feeds from the government, from the IRS, from the Office of Foreign Assets Control, and brings them together into a product we call Charity Check that provides a time-stamped document that shows that an organization is capable of receiving a tax-deductible contribution according to the IRS. And that is a product that is the only one of its kind that has been officially validated by the IRS. So I would ask you to go to the GuideStar.org, click on products, and look at Charity Check, and it can solve that problem for you.
Yeah, just a quick anecdote on that, Jacob. We were recently talking to one of our partners at a United Way chapter who uses Charity Check, but what they do is actually use the bulk version of that. So they're able to send us hundreds of potential grantees, and then we go ahead and verify that. The lady that I was talking to said that we probably saved her between 200 and 400 hours of work last year. So that was a pretty cool anecdote that we heard.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, and we've structured this so that you can get this data in many different forms through our website, through a bulk analysis like Gabe just mentioned, or also through something that's called an API, which could talk directly to the computer programs that your organization may use. So feel free to reach out and we can find something that could work for you.
Next question here is from Ruth, and Ms., I think this is a good question for you. Does the total charitable giving include donor-advised funds remaining at Fidelity or similar institutions to that?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question because I know that Giving USA, who administers the survey, has basically shared a lot of information about the amount of giving to donor-advised funds that's growing. But I know that I'm actually not sure, and I'm looking over here at Jacob in terms of the amounts that don't get distributed in a particular year. The asset base does grow, with the asset management firm and the donor-advised fund. So that capital base with interest and capital growth has an opportunity to grow. So I'm not sure about the valuation methods, Jacob.
And yeah, so Ms. is exactly right, and I think it gets to this question of distinguishing between the money that is donated by an individual donor to a donor-advised fund, which is counted in that $380 billion figure that Ms. mentioned. But the money that stays in that donor-advised fund over time is not included. That money is more comparable to the endowment of a foundation. And there have certainly been some criticisms of donor-advised funds that some donors end up parking money there. And that may be true sometimes, although it's also true that donor-advised funds give out a higher proportion of their funds in any given year than foundations tend to. So I think that's something that we may see more discussion of on Capitol Hill over the next few years as we think about how do we make sure this money gets put to use, but also how do we capture the very real advantages that donor-advised funds bring and power of a foundation to a much broader marketplace.
Great, thanks. Well, that is about time for us today. So we do have a few more questions. We'll make sure to follow up with those that we didn't get answered today. Thanks, everyone, for joining us for our final impact call of 2016. We'll be back in 2017. And for the 20% of you who have not voted yet and don't have a good excuse, make sure you get to the polls. Thanks, everybody.